Imagine this. You walk into a store. The lights are bright. The music is playing softly in the background. Rows and rows of the latest televisions, stereos, computers, and gadgets stretch out before you as far as the eye can see. Friendly salespeople in blue shirts are ready to help you find exactly what you need. The prices are competitive. The selection is overwhelming in the best way possible. You feel like a kid in a candy store. Now imagine that store disappearing overnight. Not one store, not 10 stores, over 700 locations wiped off the map, 60,000 jobs gone, more than $1 billion in merchandise liquidated at rock-bottom prices, shelves stripped bare, parking lots empty, signs taken down. What you just imagined is not a fictional story. It happened in real life to one of the most powerful retail empires America has ever seen. This is the story of Circuit City, a company that started from a single haircut conversation in 1949, became the best-performing stock in the entire country during the 1980s, was celebrated in one of the most iconic business books ever written, and then collapsed so spectacularly that it became a case study in every MBA classroom on the planet. This is not just a business story. This is a human story about ambition, brilliance, arrogance, and the terrifying speed at which a giant can fall. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will never look at a successful company the same way again. Part 1. The beginning. A haircut that changed everything. 045 to 800. Let's go back to 1949. The world is different. America is riding the post-war economic boom. People are buying homes in the suburbs, they're starting families, and they're desperate, truly desperate, for something new. Television. TV is brand new. It's the internet of its era. It's the smartphone of its time. Anyone who can get their hands on a television set is considered wealthy, modern, forward-thinking. And most people in the country, they've never owned one. Enter Samuel S. Wurtzel. Samuel is a New York importer-exporter, a businessman by instinct and by trade. He sold his company, he has some money in his pocket, and he's on vacation in Richmond, Virginia. A man on holiday with no particular plans. And then he does something completely ordinary. He goes to get a haircut. Now here's where fate steps in, because while Samuel is sitting in that barber's chair, making small talk the way people do, the barber mentions something offhand, something that probably didn't sound significant at the time. Did you hear? Richmond is about to get the first commercial TV station in the entire South. Most people would have nodded, said, "Oh, interesting," and gone back to reading the newspaper. Samuel Wurtzel heard something else entirely. He heard opportunity. His mind started racing. If Richmond was getting a TV station, a local station, with local news, local sports, local entertainment, then people in Richmond would want to watch it. And to watch it, they'd need a television set. And right now, in 1949, where in Richmond do you buy a television set? Nowhere. Samuel didn't finish his vacation. He moved his entire family from New York to Richmond, Virginia. And in January 1949, he opened a small shop selling TV sets. He named it Ward's, not after the famous Montgomery Ward department store chain, but as a personal family acronym. W for Wurtzel, A for his son Alan, R for his wife Ruth, D for his son David, and S for his own name, Samuel. This wasn't just a business. It was a family legacy from day one. Now here's something you need to understand, something that will become deeply important as this story unfolds. Samuel's timing was extraordinary. He had stumbled upon what entrepreneurs today call a blue ocean, an untapped market with no competition, enormous demand, and massive room to grow. He wasn't fighting for market share. He was creating a market. In the early years, Ward sold TV sets out of a modest storefront. But Samuel was no ordinary retailer. He was constantly watching, learning, adapting. When television technology became more widespread and TV sets alone couldn't carry the whole business, he expanded into home appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, air conditioners. He acquired other small retailers. He grew. By the mid-1960s, Ward's had multiple Virginia stores and annual revenues reaching $23 million. That's not enormous by today's standards. But remember, this started with one man in a barber's chair, acting on a hunch. Then in 1966, someone else entered the picture. someone who would take everything his father built and launch it into the stratosphere. His son, Alan Wurtzel. Alan was a lawyer by training, educated, sharp, and deeply analytical. He came back to Richmond to join the family business, and by 1970, when Samuel stepped down, Alan was in charge. And Alan was about to change everything. When Alan Wurtzel took over, the company was growing, but it was in trouble. The mid-1970s were brutal for retail. Inflation was hammering consumers, interest rates were rising, people were spending less, and Ward's, which had been a solid regional player, was facing the real possibility of bankruptcy. The store concept that had worked so well in the 1960s was beginning to feel stale, outdated. The world was changing, and Ward's had to change with it. This is the moment that separates good companies from great companies. Most businesses, when they face a crisis, react slowly. They hold meetings, they form committees, they debate. By the time they decide on a course of action, the window of opportunity has already closed. Alan Wurtzel moved fast. He made a critical decision, complete reinvention. Not a small adjustment, not a tweak, a complete reimagining of what the stores could be. He studied the market. He looked at what customers actually wanted, and he arrived at a concept that seems obvious now, but was genuinely revolutionary in the late 1970s. The electronic superstore. Instead of a modest shop with limited inventory, Alan envisioned massive retail spaces, enormous showrooms packed floor to ceiling with every electronic product imaginable. TVs of every size, stereos, VCRs, microwave ovens, the full range of consumer technology, all in one place, staffed by knowledgeable salespeople who could actually explain what these products did and why customers needed them. The concept was called the Circuit City Superstore, and it was launched in 1984. The same year, the company formally renamed itself from Ward's to Circuit City Stores, Inc., and listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The timing, once again, was perfect. Think about what was happening in America in 1984. The personal computer revolution was underway. VCRs were becoming household items. CD players were arriving. Cable television was exploding. Americans were spending money on electronics like never before. Factory shipments of consumer electronics literally doubled between 1980 and 1986. The share of households with VCRs went from 1% in 1980 to nearly 70% by the end of the decade. Circuit City walked straight into the middle of this boom, with massive stores, wide selection, competitive prices, and trained sales staff. The result was nothing short of explosive. Under the leadership of Rick Sharp, who became CEO after Alan Wurtzel retired in 1986, the company's growth numbers are almost difficult to believe. Sales went from $1 billion to $12.6 billion. Profits went from $22 million to $327 million. The number of stores went from 69 to 616. Let that sink in. From 69 stores to 616 stores. From $1 billion to $12.6 billion in revenue. This was not steady incremental growth. This was a rocket ship, and the stock market knew it. During the 5-year period from 1983 to 1987, Circuit City delivered returns to shareholders of over 9,000%, not 90%, not 900%, 9,000%. It was the single best performing stock in the United States during that period. If you had invested $10,000 in Circuit City in 1983 and held on, you would have had close to $900,000 just 5 years later. By 1995, Circuit City was on the Fortune 500 at position 280. By 2003, it would peak at position 151. At its height, the company operated more than 700 stores across the United States and Canada, employed 60,000 people, and generated annual sales exceeding $12 billion. This was one of the great American retail success stories. And then came the book that would make Circuit City's story immortal, for all the wrong reasons. In 2001, management guru Jim Collins published Good to Great, one of the most influential business books ever written. Collins and his research team spent 5 years studying companies that had made the leap from merely good performance to truly great, sustained performance. Out of thousands of companies analyzed, only 11 made the cut. Circuit City was one of them. Collins praised Circuit City's leadership, its culture, its ability to attract talented people, and its disciplined approach to growth. The company was held up as a model for every business in America. CEOs assigned the book to their entire leadership teams. Business schools taught it. Good to Great sold over 4 million copies. Circuit City was literally written into the canon of American business excellence. And then, just 7 years after the book was published, Circuit City filed for bankruptcy. If there's a single fact in this entire story that should make your blood run cold, that should make every successful business leader, every ambitious entrepreneur, every confident investor genuinely afraid, it's that one. 7 years. That's all it took. How does the best performing stock in America, a company celebrated in one of the most prestigious business books ever written, a company with 700 stores and 60,000 employees, how does that company disappear? The answer is more complicated than you think, and more terrifying. Here is a truth that great companies hate to hear. The very things that made you successful can become the very things that destroy you. Circuit City's formula for success was brilliant. Wide selection, great prices, knowledgeable sales staff, big box superstore format. In the 1980s and early 1990s, this was revolutionary. It was the only way to buy electronics at scale. But here's the problem. When you're winning so convincingly for so long, you start to believe you're untouchable. You stop listening. You stop innovating. You stop being afraid. And fear, as counterintuitive as it sounds, is what keeps great companies great. Fear of the competitor. Fear of complacency. Fear of losing it all. When a company loses its fear, it loses its edge. Circuit City lost its fear somewhere in the late 1990s. And at the same time, something else was happening. Something that would change everything. Best Buy was rising. Best Buy had been founded in 1966, around the same time Circuit City was finding its footing. For decades it was a smaller regional competitor, nothing that kept Circuit City's executives up at night. But in the 1990s, Best Buy made a strategic shift that would prove catastrophic for Circuit City. Best Buy eliminated commission sales staff. This was a radical move. At the time, consumer electronics retail ran on commissions. Your salesperson earned a percentage of every sale. The idea was that this incentivized great service. The better they helped you, the more they sold, the more they earned. But customers had started to hate it. Walk into a commissioned electronics store, and you'd immediately feel the pressure. Salespeople following you, steering you toward higher margin products, upselling you on warranties you didn't need. It felt manipulative. Customers felt hunted, not helped. Best Buy removed the commission. Their staff became advisors, not predators. Customers could browse freely, without pressure. The shopping experience felt open and comfortable. And here's the genius of it from a business standpoint. Best Buy's labor costs plummeted. Without commissions, they could price more aggressively, pass savings on to customers, and still maintain healthy margins. Circuit City watched all of this happening and made a fatal choice. They did nothing. Not because they didn't notice. Circuit City's executives absolutely understood what Best Buy was doing, but they had convinced themselves that their commission model was superior, that trained, incentivized salespeople were an advantage, not a liability. This is what psychologists call confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret new information in a way that confirms what you already believe, rather than challenging it. Circuit City believed in their model, so they found reasons to keep believing in it. Meanwhile, customers were voting with their wallets, and they were walking into Best Buy. But the commission model wasn't Circuit City's only mistake, not by a long shot. In the mid-1990s, Alan Wurtzel, now retired but still observing, and the company's leadership had an idea. A brilliant idea, actually. They called it CarMax. CarMax was a revolutionary concept. Apply the superstore model to used cars. Large lots, huge inventory, fixed, no haggle prices. Professional sales experience. No pressure, no games, just transparent car buying. The first CarMax opened in Richmond, Virginia in 1993. It was immediately and undeniably successful. This was a genuinely innovative idea, and it worked. CarMax grew rapidly, expanding to 40 locations by 2000. But here's the problem. CarMax was not Circuit City's business. While Circuit City's leadership was devoting enormous amounts of time, capital, and mental energy to building a used car business, their actual core business, consumer electronics retail, was being challenged and outmaneuvered. The people who should have been laser-focused on competing with Best Buy were instead building car dealerships. Circuit City eventually spun off CarMax in 2002, and CarMax today is actually a tremendous success story, worth billions of dollars. But for Circuit City, the distraction came at a devastating cost. They had taken their eye off the ball. And while they weren't looking, the world changed around them. The year 2000 arrived, and with it came a wave of change so powerful, so fundamental, that it would reshape every single sector of the retail industry: the internet. At first, nobody took online shopping seriously. Amazon was a bookstore. You couldn't try on clothes online. And electronics? Surely people would want to see, touch, and compare electronics before buying. Surely they'd want expert advice. Surely the physical store experience was irreplaceable. This is what Circuit City's leadership told themselves. This is what Blockbuster told themselves about streaming. This is what Borders told themselves about digital books. This is what Kodak told themselves about digital photography. Are you starting to see the pattern? The companies that survived the digital revolution weren't the ones who assumed their advantages were permanent. They were the ones who asked themselves the scariest possible question: what if we're wrong? What if our entire model is obsolete? What would we have to do differently? Circuit City's leadership didn't ask that question. Or if they did, they didn't like the answer. Because here's what the internet did to their business model. Piece by piece. Price transparency. Suddenly, customers could compare prices across dozens of retailers in seconds, from their home computers. The days of a customer walking in, trusting the price tag, and buying were over. Every Circuit City price could be immediately compared to Amazon, to Best Buy's website, to a dozen other online retailers. Circuit City's pricing power, one of their core strengths, evaporated. Information availability. Circuit City's trained sales force had been valuable because customers didn't know much about the products they were buying. A knowledgeable salesperson could explain the difference between two TVs, recommend the right stereo receiver, walk you through the features of a new computer. But by the mid-2000s, customers were arriving in stores having already researched their purchase online. They didn't need the salesperson's expertise anymore. And Circuit City's high-commission sales force, which was expensive, suddenly looked less like an advantage and more like a burden. Convenience. Amazon didn't have store hours. Amazon didn't require parking. Amazon delivered to your door. The friction of driving to a Circuit City, finding what you wanted, waiting for help, and driving home was becoming harder and harder to justify when the alternative was clicking a button. Circuit City's response to all of this was slow. Painfully, dangerously slow. They launched an online store, eventually. It worked, poorly. They didn't integrate the online and in-store experience the way modern retailers have learned to do. They didn't leverage their enormous physical footprint to offer the kind of click-and-collect, same-day delivery experience that could have given them an edge. They were fighting a 21st century war with 20th century weapons. And things were about to get much worse. By 2005, Circuit City was in serious trouble. Revenue was declining, margins were shrinking, stock price was falling, the pressure was intense. So they brought in a new CEO, Philip Schoonover. Now here's a critical moment, a fork in the road that would determine the company's fate. When a company is in trouble, there are two fundamental approaches you can take. Option A, invest aggressively in what makes you special, improve the customer experience, train your people, upgrade your stores, fight for every customer with everything you have. Option B, cut costs, slash expenses, squeeze out short-term profits, hope the numbers look better in the quarterly report. Which approach do you think Circuit City chose? In 2007, Philip Schoonover made one of the most catastrophic decisions in the history of American retail. He laid off 3,400 employees. Circuit City laid off its highest-paid hourly workers, the experienced, knowledgeable sales associates who had been with the company for years, who knew the products inside and out, who customers trusted and came back to see. These were the people who had built Circuit City's reputation for customer service, They were the living embodiment of the brand, and they were fired. Not because they were underperforming, but because they were being paid above a certain wage threshold. They were replaced with lower-paid, less experienced workers. Let that sit with you for a moment. Circuit City's primary competitive advantage was its knowledgeable sales staff, and they fired their best salespeople to save money. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. News outlets covered the story. Customers were outraged. The message it sent was devastating. Circuit City doesn't value its people. Circuit City doesn't care about service. Circuit City is desperate. When you signal desperation to the market responds accordingly. Vendors began to lose confidence. Suppliers started tightening credit terms. Investors sold. The stock fell further, which created more pressure to cut costs, which led to more desperate decisions, which created more loss of confidence. This is what business people call a death spiral, and once a company enters one, it is extraordinarily difficult to escape. But wait, there's more. At exactly the same time Circuit City was gutting its workforce, they made another baffling decision. They exited the appliance business. For decades, appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, dryers had been a core part of Circuit City's product mix. It was part of their DNA, going all the way back to Samuel Wurtzel's original Ward stores. Appliances had lower profit margins than electronics, but they drove enormous foot traffic. People came in for a washing machine and left with a TV. They were the anchor that kept customers coming back. Circuit City stopped selling appliances entirely. Best Buy kept selling appliances. In fact, Best Buy expanded its appliance selection. And the customers who had been shopping at Circuit City for appliances, they went to Best Buy. They went to Best Buy. And many of them never came back. Then came the decision about store formats. Rather than investing in improving their existing stores, making them more attractive, more modern, more compelling, Circuit City began downsizing them. They reduced floor space. They cut visual merchandising budgets. Their stores started to look tired, dated, and understocked compared to the bright, inviting Best Buy locations down the street. In retail, the store is the product. If the store looks like it's failing, customers assume it is. And when customers assume a company is failing, they stop going there, because they don't want to be stuck with products from a store that might close, without warranty support, without parts availability. Perception becomes reality. By late 2007, Circuit City was losing money at an alarming rate. They desperately tried to find investors, partners, buyers, anyone who might inject capital or acquire the business and keep it afloat. The private equity firm Blockbuster, yes, the same Blockbuster that was facing its own existential crisis, actually made an offer to acquire Circuit City. Think about that for a second. Two of the most famous retail failures in American history almost merged into one company. The deal fell apart. Other potential buyers emerged. They disappeared too. And then came November 2008, and with it, the event that would push Circuit City over the edge once and for all. The autumn of 2008 is one of the darkest periods in modern economic history. Lehman Brothers had just collapsed. The global financial system was in freefall. Credit markets froze. Consumer spending plunged. Businesses across every industry were fighting for survival. Circuit City was already wounded. The financial crisis was the bullet that finished them. Suppliers, Sony, Hewlett-Packard, Samsung, and others, had been growing increasingly nervous about Circuit City's financial stability. They were worried that if they shipped products and Circuit City collapsed, they'd never get paid. So they did what any rational business does when it smells danger. They cut off credit. Without sales, you can't pay your bills. Without paying your bills, your suppliers cut you off further. The circle closes. On November 10, 2008, Circuit City filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company announced the closure of 155 stores and the layoff of 17% of its workforce, more than 7,000 additional people losing their jobs just weeks before the holiday season. Circuit City's CFO, Bruce Bisanko, wrote in the court filing that without immediate relief, the company was concerned it would not be able to receive goods for Black Friday and the upcoming holiday season. The company requested a loan of $1.1 billion from the courts just to buy new inventory. The judge set a deadline, January 16, 2009, find a buyer or liquidate. The holiday season came and went. Customers walked into Circuit City stores and saw something heartbreaking and deeply familiar. The clearance signs. Everything must go. Prices slashed 30%, 40%, 50%. Products piled on tables with no organization, no presentation. The stores that had once gleamed with possibility now felt like a garage sale. Rumors swirled about potential buyers. 2 unnamed companies were said to be interested. Negotiations happened. They failed. No buyer could be found. On January 16, 2009, Circuit City announced it would begin the complete liquidation of all remaining assets. The court confirmed the decision. The company that had been the best performing stock in America during the 1980s, that had been celebrated as a model of corporate excellence, that had employed 60,000 people across 700 locations, was done. The last Circuit City store in the United States turned off its lights for the final time on March 8, 2009. 60 years, from a single barber chair conversation in Richmond, Virginia, to over 700 locations across America. From a small TV shop to a $12 billion retail empire. And then, in what felt like the blink of an eye, to nothing. Gone. Over 30,000 jobs lost in the final weeks alone. More than 500 store locations shuttered. Gone. Just gone. The silence in those empty parking lots was deafening. Now here's where we need to pause, because if we walk away from this story just feeling sad about Circuit City, or worse, if we feel superior, as if we would have done things differently, as if we would have seen it coming, then we've missed the entire point. The terrifying truth about Circuit City's collapse is not that it was unusual. It's that it was predictable. It followed a pattern that has repeated itself again and again throughout business history, and it will keep repeating, with different companies, different industries, different names on the buildings, unless we learn. So here are the lessons, real ones, the kind that sting a little. Lesson 1. Success is the most dangerous drug in business. When Circuit City was winning, they stopped being afraid. They stopped questioning. They stopped challenging their own assumptions. They mistook past success for future immunity. But the business world doesn't give lifetime achievement awards. Every single day, you have to earn your position again. The moment you believe you've arrived, that's the moment your competitors start gaining on you. Lesson 2. Your customers are always telling you the truth. Are you listening? Customers were telling Circuit City they preferred Best Buy's non-commission model. They were telling them that online shopping was changing their behavior. They were telling them with their feet and their wallets exactly where retail was going. Circuit City wasn't listening. They were talking to themselves, confirming what they already believed, ignoring the signals they didn't want to hear. What are your customers telling you right now that you're not listening to? Lesson 3. Never cut what makes you special to save money. Firing your most experienced salespeople to reduce costs is not a business strategy. It's an act of self-destruction in slow motion. When a company's competitive advantage is its people, and Circuit City's genuinely was, and you eliminate those people, you haven't saved money. You've spent your future. Cost-cutting that hollows out your core competency is not efficiency. It's suicide by spreadsheet. Lesson 4. Disruption doesn't announce itself. You have to look for it. Amazon and internet retail didn't appear overnight and immediately destroy Circuit City. It happened gradually. At first it looked manageable. Then it looked concerning. Then it looked existential. By the time Circuit City was ready to take it seriously, they were already too far behind. The companies that survive disruption are the ones who assume disruption is always coming, and build systems to detect and respond to it early, when there's still time to adapt. Lesson 5. The brand is everything, and it's fragile. When Circuit City fired its 3,400 highest paid workers, it did more than reduce payroll. It sent a signal to the entire market. Something is wrong here. Customers sensed it. Suppliers sensed it. Investors sensed it. And once a brand signals weakness, once people start asking, will they still be here next year? The decline accelerates in ways that are almost impossible to stop. Trust, built over 60 years, can be destroyed in a press release. Lesson 6. The good to great trap. Being celebrated is not the same as being safe. Jim Collins' book praised Circuit City in 2001. 7 years later, they were bankrupt. This isn't a criticism of Collins. It's a profound reminder that no business is ever finished evolving. The strategies and cultures that made Circuit City great in 1995 were not sufficient to make them great in 2005. The world had changed. Circuit City hadn't. Being celebrated for past excellence is one of the most dangerous places a company can be, because it breeds complacency. It creates a false sense of permanence. It makes leaders protective of the formula that earned them praise, even when that formula is becoming obsolete. Here's something most people don't know. Circuit City isn't completely gone. In 2018, an entrepreneur named Ronnie Schmoll acquired the Circuit City brand name, trademark, and e-commerce rights. He had ambitious plans: kiosks, stores within stores, and eventually, standalone retail locations. He believed the Circuit City name still held power, that Americans who had grown up shopping there carried a nostalgic attachment to it. He wasn't entirely wrong. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. The Circuit City name does evoke something: memories of Christmas shopping with parents, the excitement of buying a first VCR, a first CD player, a first computer. But a name is not a business, and as of today, the Circuit City revival remains a shadow of what the company once was: a website, a limited online presence, a brand trying to find its footing in a world completely dominated by Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, and 100 other digital competitors. Whether the revival ever becomes something real remains to be seen. But the original Circuit City, the one with 700 stores and 60,000 employees and $12 billion in annual revenue, that one is gone forever. And in its place are the empty shells of strip mall locations, now occupied by other businesses: dollar stores, fitness centers, discount clothing retailers, churches. The circuit is broken. Here's what I want you to walk away with today. Circuit City's story is not ancient history. It's not a cautionary tale from a different era. It's happening right now, to companies you know and use every day. Right now, somewhere in the world, there is a CEO sitting in a boardroom, looking at strong quarterly numbers, feeling confident, feeling secure, and completely failing to see the disruption that is already beginning to undermine everything they've built. Right now, there's a retail brand that its customers still love, that's making the slow, incremental decisions that are quietly hollowing out its competitive advantage. Right now, there's a company being celebrated for its excellence, being written up in articles and case studies and business magazines, that is, without knowing it, walking toward the edge of a cliff. The question is not whether disruption will come. It always comes. The question is whether you're willing to be honest with yourself while you're still standing, whether you're willing to question your assumptions when it's still uncomfortable rather than when it's too late, whether you're willing to cannibalize your own model before someone else does it for you. Samuel Wurtzel heard something in a barber's chair in 1949 and bet everything on it. That kind of courage to see what others miss, to act when others hesitate, that's what built Circuit City. And it's the same courage that was missing at the end. The stores are gone, the signs are taken down, the parking lots have been repainted for other businesses. But the story isn't over, because the story of Circuit City is really the story of every company that ever grew great and then stopped being afraid. And if you're building something, if you're leading something, if you believe in something, don't stop being afraid. That fear, that restless, uncomfortable feeling that someone might be smarter, faster, and hungrier than you, that's not your enemy. That's your edge. If this video changed the way you think about business, even just a little, hit that like button and subscribe. More stories like this are coming. Stories about the companies that won, the companies that lost, and the lessons hiding in between.